Good evening, good evening, everybody. My name is Jason Rogers. I am the Community Development Director. Thank you for being with us tonight.
My name is Mike Martinelli. I am a planner with the City of Commerce City. I'm also the local government designee to the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. So my role deals mostly with the review of oil and gas permits, a lot of work on specific details of the regulations.
Good evening. My name is Matt Sura. I'm an oil and gas attorney that works exclusively with neighborhoods, individuals, and local oil and gas matters.
Good evening, everyone. This is Matt Hager. I'm the Deputy City Attorney with Commerce City, and I've been doing what I can to assist in our process. I'm working on code changes and updates.
All right. Thank you all, gentlemen, for those introductions. And for my part, I am just the moderator for this event, so I'll be kind of help moving along between the presentation and the questions. So just a quick reminder for everybody why we're here this evening. The purpose of this meeting is mostly just to focus on the issue of the city's proposed updates to the Land Development Code, which is where all the city's oil and gas regulations lie. So when you hear the term LDC, that's what's being referred to. The Land Development Code is where all the city's oil and gas regulations live. So the city is proposing to make updates to those regulations, as I'm sure many of you have that background already. So that's the primary purpose of tonight's meeting. The main thing we want you to take away from this tonight is learning more about what those regulations entail, what are the details, what do they mean, and hopefully help you make a better informed decision about your opinions on them. So what I do want to remind everyone about here for this evening is that any comments, questions that you make during this conversation will not go into the record as part of the public comment period that is occurring right now as part of the updates to the oil and gas regulations. So that is something you can do through the city website as well. If you go to c3gov.com/oilgas, under the updating city regulations section, you will find the link to submit an official public comment for the public comment period with relation to these Land Development Code updates. So these comments that you make tonight are really not the opportunity to state your case or your particular opinions. While you're certainly welcome to bring up questions and we want you to learn more about these regulations, the comment form or testifying at one of our upcoming public hearings, be it at the Planning Commission or before City Council, those are your best opportunities to actually state your opinions, in addition to, of course, commenting on those regulations themselves. So just a reminder for everyone, I know we do have a lot to get to here this evening and only about 90 minutes to do it, so we'll get things moving, but just did want to set expectations for you tonight as well. We're going to start with a brief presentation, give you a little bit of background about the regulations and what all that means. Our panel will take you through some of those details with a presentation. After that, we are going to address the written questions that were submitted in advance of this meeting. We've had a chance to group those by topic and hopefully in the interest of time to help enter the topics in as the questions allowed. So we will address all those written questions by topic, and then we will open up the floor for those folks who registered to ask a question live on this call. One reminder about that is that for many of those folks, if you did say that you wanted to ask a question, when that time comes, we'll call on you and you will be able to ask that question yourself here a little bit later on in the meeting. So we'll start with the presentation here, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to our panelists here to walk you through that.
Thank you, Travis. Dominic, if you don't mind the presentation, then I think we can go ahead and get started. Okay, we'll let this load for a moment. So thank you, Dominic. Once again, if we can go to the next slide. Once again, you already met the panel. Obviously, Travis moderated, myself with the rest of the team. Kind of jumping into it. Obviously, I think a little bit of background, a little bit of history. Following the adoption of Senate Bill 181 last year, which gave the local government more authority to regulate oil and gas, the city undertook a process to update its regulations in the Land Development Code. This process allows the city to adopt revised regulations that are reflective of recent regulatory trends and current best practices for the industry. Additionally, the regulations will also allow the city to address the unique impacts of the oil and gas industry as it is as well. So the following presentation tonight will outline, once again, a couple of the bullet points that you have before you, modification of approval criteria, the review process that's established, a limit on timeline to drill, requirements for an initial assessment process, reductions in the allowed zone districts within the Land Development Code, setbacks as it relates, and reverse setbacks as it relates to the size of the facility from home sites, residential home sites. Next slide, Dominic. Ultimately, it also applies additional application requirements. It does call for visual mitigation, landscaping, lighting, and I'll say the mitigation of noise standards. It does also look at the inspections and how those costs would be covered for inspections of various facilities. It would also look at continuous air quality monitoring requirements, updating definitions, looking at a fine schedule for non-compliance, and looking at the best management practices that were identified in the ROA, modified, and included as a separate document as part of the Land Development Code. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dominic to be able to walk through some of the specific details of these various sections.
So I'm going to go ahead and kind of give a follow-up to what Jason was saying, as he gave more of a high-level overview of the specific items that we're modifying as part of this code update. So we'll go ahead and get started with the initial assessment process, which is intended to be the first step when an operator plans to do drilling in the city. It's an establishment and a requirement for a site that is more than 2,000 feet, or that's less than 2,000 feet from residents, schools, parks, recreation facilities, streams, and a number of the items listed below in gray. So what happens is when an operator is planning facilities within the city, they would submit an analysis during the pre-application process. So they would formally request to have a meeting with the city, and there would be a discussion about 3 potential sites for a specific location that they're planning to conduct operations against. Within our draft LDC, we've defined a number of criteria that we would review these potential proposed facilities against to ensure that they are more protective of health, safety, and welfare in the environment, are not adjacent to schools and parks, and have adequate some buffering, and are suitable for a number of the best management practices that have been outlined within the code. Staff would then identify the applicants which sites out of the 3 that they proposed are eligible to submit for a permit, and then they could apply for a permit at that location. So this is essentially a pre-application before the actual application. Moving to the next slide. This is kind of an example of how that enumeration process would look at. So basically you area where there's planned activity and you look at the existing conditions, you would map those potential conditions compared to where potential sites might be located. And then the most protective of health, safety, and welfare, or more than one or none, could be selected to submit for a permit based on that specific location. So within that, we're also requiring a number of other provisions, including planned operations and other areas of the city, so we can look at it from a comprehensive overview look. So the review process If your site that you're proposing is less than 2,000 feet away from any of the criteria that we stated, you would have to go through that alternative site analysis process. But if you're greater than 2,000 feet away with a couple other provisions, you could potentially bypass that requirement and have your oil and gas permit processed administratively. As a rule of thumb, if you have to go through the alternative site location analysis process, your oil and gas permit would need to be approved by both Planning Commission and City Council. So within that, we're establishing minimum setbacks, and I do want to preface this by saying that the alternative site analysis exercise is intended to filter through this in circumstances, but if there is a circumstance where a site needs to be within 1,000 feet or more from any of the following criteria, which includes existing homes, platted homes, or property currently entitled for residential uses, high occupancy building units, which can include schools, assisted living facilities, rec centers, parks or recreation centers, sports fields, senior living or assisted living facilities. We've also modified our regulations since presenting this to Council in November to include public water supply wells, providing an adequate setback for some shallow groundwater wells that might be close to a facility to make sure that there's adequate buffering and adequate water protection, and that includes reservoirs as well. So as it pertains to these setbacks, they would apply to a new facility from any of those features that are existing. And those setbacks, I'll get into a little bit of how we measure from the edge of what we call the production site to the edge of a parcel. So we'll get into this on the next slide, but it accounts for the long-term permanent condition of the well site rather than the temporary shows. And the setback from the parcel boundary line as opposed to the building unit is to account for outdoor spaces that may be frequented for easier administration and measurement. So an example of this you can see here. The exhibit in the upper left-hand corner is what is called the drilling and completion site. So over the lifetime of the well, there will be multiple phases that the site goes through. Initially, there's going to be what's called the drilling phase, where they actually physically go and drill the wells, and then the completions, which includes the flowback and the fracking process. These are typically much larger sites than what will be present for the lifetime of the well, which is reflected in the production site. A drilling and completion site could be anywhere from 16 to 20 acres, while the production site would be more likely less than half of that size. The drilling and completion site will be a temporary condition of about 4 to 6 months, depending on the technology the operator is employing. So the CRGCC currently measures from any equipment that would be on the site. And you can see between the drilling and completion site and the production site that there are some temporary conditions that get removed when it becomes a permanent facility. So the CRGCC measures from any permanent equipment to the edge of a building unit. So that would be the direct edge of a home or the direct edge of a school or something along those lines. They do measure schools from the edge of parks or anything like that, including the recreation or ball fields. But the measurement that the city is taking would be to measure from the edge of the fence line of the permanent facility to the edge of a property line. And for the reasons that were stated previously, there are some noted differences between that. So there are additional subdivision and plating regulations that are being proposed for any home builders that would be within proximity of an oil and gas site. There would need to be a minimum setback from any newly constructed homes from an existing facility based on the number of wells that are on that site. So within anywhere from between 1 to 10 wells, there would be a minimum setback of 300, and that scales all the way up to 500 feet from a facility that has 25 or more wells on a well pad. This is to essentially account for that sites that have more wells generally will have greater impacts. Thus, there should be a larger setback to provide greater protection from health, safety, and welfare. There's some additional plating requirements that we've taken into account that incorporates best practices from other community regulations as well. There have also been proposed changes to the zoning. So previously, before the implementation of Senate Bill 181, local government authority to regulate oil and gas facilities through zoning. So as our current code reads, an oil and gas facility could be located in any zone district except for a public zone district. And we're proposing to modify that to generally industrial, agricultural, or anything that has what's called planned unit development with underlying industrial uses or where oil and gas is already allowed. So we're essentially prohibiting a facility from being located in an area that's zoned residential, smaller agricultural, anything under 10 acres, and then commercial and public parcels. So lapse and forfeiture, so proposing a 3-year limit on an oil and gas permit. And this is necessary to regulate the time frame of drilling. Basically saying that if you're an operator that is given an oil and gas permit and there's a scenario where you're not able to drill all the wells within a 3-year time frame and it takes multiple years, it really impedes the ability for additional development to occur, whether that's housing or commercial or a number of other uses that can generate tax revenues for the city. So what we're looking at here is a 3-year limit on being able to drill all of the wells, which we've consulted with a number of oil and gas operators as an adequate time frame and typical time frame for drilling wells on a site. Given that every circumstance and every unique situation is not equal, we're also allowing for an additional 1-year extension based on a number of strict approval criteria, ensuring that essentially if a residential subdivision has not encroached around that site, or if there isn't anything going on that would need to be alerted of, then that criteria would prohibit that additional extension. But if there are circumstances that allow it, the director would have that authority. Any other extensions beyond that would require approval from city council. So an example of this is a location in northern Brighton where only 6 of the 24 permitted wells had been drilled within probably a 4-year time frame or 3 to 4 year time frame at this point, which has stalled the development of adjacent residential. So it's that kind of balance between the two that the city is attempting to strike. The quality monitoring. There are proposed air quality monitoring regulations that the city has been consulting with the Air Quality Control Division of CDPHE. There's a number of stakeholder groups that have been going on that the city has been in tune to, and looking at best practices and other jurisdiction regulations to understand this new continuous monitoring technology that's being deployed and how that type of monitoring can be deployed on potential sites within the city. So what we're looking at is for a potential oil and gas site, there would need to be continuous monitoring of some form during the drilling and completion phase that we discussed. And then 3 years into the permanent production phase, if there are homes that get developed within 1,000 feet of a production facility, that continuous monitoring requirement we need to continue in perpetuity. Measured pollutants could include methane, volatile organic compounds, hazardous air pollutants, oxides of nitrogen, particulate matter, and fine particulate matter. These are all particulates and pollutants that can be measured in some form and technology. Some of these may not be able to be continuously monitored due to technology constraints, but there are other deployment measures, including what are called SUMA canisters, where if there's some sort of spike in a baseline threshold that's conducted through an air quality monitoring study, that could be deployed to figure out what the chemicals are being produced. And this monitoring would be conducted by a third party that is approved by the city, with the operator bearing the expense of monitoring. So best management practices, these are a list of best management practices that we've been consulting with the state, with other operators, and with other local jurisdictions. The version that we've presented as part of our draft regulation, which came out in March, were actually from the regional operator agreement that was signed with Extraction. We took those best management practices and went beyond and extended some of those and included them within the document. So this would be a document updated on an annual basis in continuing technologies. City Council would need to approve any changes to this document. There are a number of additional air quality requirements, including specific prohibitions on certain chemicals during the hydraulic fracturing stage, requirements for closed pitless systems, containment berms, and a requirement for a water quality monitoring plan. A number of other safety standards, noise mitigation. We're implementing within the code maximum decibel level of 55 decibels, or 4 decibels over the baseline sound conditions that are operating during their sound study. There's a number of visual mitigation requirements and landscaping requirements. We really bundle those together, understand that you can potentially modify the visual impact of these sites through use of low profile tanks, painting standards, and incorporating drought tolerant landscaping designed in a certain way to obfuscate the view of these facilities during their continual operations phases. There's also additional community outreach provisions, including the operator would be required to maintain a list of residences within a quarter mile, biannual update requirements to the city, a requirement for a dedicated operator phone line, risk management assessments, incident and accident reporting, and a number of other provisions. And then there are relatively strong insurance requirements with state and insurance policy minimums, and also bonding requirements for plug and abandoned wells. Other significant changes that we're proposing, application requirements, including significant modifications to the permit submittal requirements and plans that operators would need to prepare, which are generally similar to what we've required within the regional operator agreement. Any operators will be required to reimburse the city for any third-party technical review. There's also a prohibition on within the 100-year floodplain, and a number of site development standards, which include visual mitigation, fencing, landscaping, lighting, and sign standards. And then some changes to the wildlife mitigation plan requirements, a number of other waste management requirements, sanitary regulations, and storm water management requirements. And then operators would need to conduct a traffic study to evaluate the impacts of the truck traffic that might be associated on the sites. There's also proposed prohibitions of gas storage wells and a number of other prohibited practices that the city had already adopted. And then inspection requirements, which require the operator to reimburse the city for all inspection costs, and the added authority to inspect facilities at any time without prior notice. So with that, I'm going to pass it back off to Jason, who will do a quick wrap up of this presentation, and then we'll move into questions.
Thank you, Dominic. I appreciate you kind of walking through the technical details. You know, I think at a very high level, kind of once again summarizing it, you know, what this code attempts or proposal attempts to provide as an effort is to codify obviously existing best practices that is out there with the industry today. Once again, adopting local government protections that are granted through Senate Bill 181. Incorporating meaningful health, safety, general welfare, and environmental standards. Obviously regulating oil and gas development through zoning authority, establishing an effective process, predictable process for permitting, approval, and permit evaluation. Once again, also looking how we're, you know, not only looking at how we're doing the virtual town hall, but obviously have met with a number of different stakeholders and interested parties since the inception of updating our code, being from the members of public, oil and gas focus groups, stakeholder groups, and other regulatory agencies, to being able to provide a qualitative feedback to our mayor, city council, so that they can make an informed decision at the appropriate time. Before we go on, I do think it is important to kind of highlight what is the remaining schedule, not only for us as staff, but also for the public, and ultimately where we ultimately may end up in front of mayor and city council. As of today, the May 29th deadline for public comment still stands. Obviously, we extended that originally from April 10th. Now, obviously, as we continue to navigate the COVID crisis and at the direction of mayor and city council, that could be adjusted and could be modified to allow for additional time. But until such direction right now, we are looking at concluding the public comment phase of this project as of May 29th. If that and when that occurs, June 8th would be the identified date. We would bring feedback that we've received and the research that we've been able to conduct to provide for this proposed language and the feedback that comes from it to City Council at a study session. Study sessions as of today are suspended. So in the event study sessions are not reinstated, we would work with executive management at the city level to look at finding another alternative solution and being able to bring the feedback forward. If the schedule stays true to the May 29th and the June 8th date, there would be a planning on June 16th, followed by a first and second reading tentatively for July for mayor and city council consideration. Next slide, Dominic. So once again, just kind of highlighting, once again, meeting overview, staff panel here, myself, Dominic, Matt Sir, and Mr. Matt Hader are here to respond to pre-submitted audience questions and obviously questions that may come from registered attendees. As that, when you're asking questions, you must have checked the dedicated box in your registration form in order to ask a question of the panel. The moderator will call on you to be able to ask your question. I will say, given that we are working with a certain amount of time, please be mindful of time constraints while asking questions. And obviously, the most effective way of being able to make sure that your comments are heard and translated accordingly so that we can then share that with obviously the final decision-making body. Please put that in writing to the city. There you see where written comments can be submitted at c3gov.com, oil and gas. So that way we can make sure that your comments are being in as part of the public record for this update. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Travis.
All right, thank you very much, Jason, and Dominic as well, of course, for that initial presentation. Just in case anybody did jump into the meeting just a little bit late, that was kind of our opening presentation there from some of the members of our oil and gas team. They are our panel for this event as well, and they will be answering those questions. So if you're on the line and you would like to ask a question live, hang in there and we will get to those as well. Again, as Jason noted there, what we want is that everybody who did indicate on their registration form that they wanted to ask a question, you'll have the opportunity to do that a little bit later on. We'll call on you and you'll have the opportunity to speak your question live here in the meeting. But the first step is we did want to go ahead and address the pre-submitted questions that were submitted via the SurveyMonkey link. That was on the website and that was live right up until just a few minutes ago. So if you did submit a question in advance, we're going to go ahead and get to those now. Our first question that we're going to address here is from Robert. So Robert, thank you for the question. He would like to know who is going to be responsible for the inspections and how are they going to be qualified?
So I can provide the answer to that question. So as it pertains to inspection authority, there are a number of provisions and modifications that we proposed as part of these updates. Ultimately, the operator would be required to bear the expense of the inspections. The city would have the full authority to inspect an oil and gas facility at any time. Essentially how that would work is where we would potentially hire a oil and gas inspector who has experience doing this kind of work either with the state or in other jurisdictions to conduct those inspections, which could be shared between another jurisdiction and the city. In terms of the cost reimbursement in that type of specific instance, the city has explored a number of avenues to fund as it pertains to inspections. But as it's written in the proposed code, the operator would be required to provide funding for that inspection service.
Okay, thank you, Dominic. Our next pre-submitted written question is from Carl. And Carl's question is, why has the city added so many restrictions to cater to a few loudmouths after the defeat of Proposition 112. You are killing a very essential industry that adds substantial amounts of funds to the city budget. And I believe Jason, the Community Development Director, would like to answer that one.
So Carl, thank you for the question. I think we all can agree that oil and gas is an industry of interest, and given SB 181, the city believes it is important to balance the needs of all stakeholders, that being corporate citizens, that being the oil and gas industry itself, but also our residents. The city has an opportunity to develop regulations to mitigate unique impacts of oil and gas while still allowing its limits.
All right, thank you for that answer, Jason. Our next question is actually a group of questions that were all related to the topic of setbacks. So for our panelists here, I think I'll throw these all into one group, and then I'll let our panelists pick out the areas of each one of these questions that they'd like to address. Just to start off here, the first question related to setbacks was, why are you not using the 2,500-foot setback that has been deemed to be the minimum for safety if you care about the health and safety of residents? So that first question, why are we not using 2,500 feet in these proposed regulations as the minimum? Another question is, on the same topic, why are you using 1,000-foot setbacks from residential areas, playgrounds, schools, etc., instead of a minimum of 2,500 feet, given the current evidence-based information that anything closer negatively impacts health and safety of people? The next question is, the first thing we should focus on are setbacks. In Weld County, it is a 2-mile evacuation radius if something goes wrong. Why wouldn't we start there to keep our residents safe? And then the next question related to setbacks, can you please add regulations that an operator cannot drill in an existing neighborhood? Example would be 104th Avenue and Highway 2. Your residents invested in this area and we need to be protected. The proposed pad on that site is too close to homes, businesses, and schools. So there are a few, again, different caveats there amongst those questions, but all related to setbacks. So I guess first off, Matt Sura, our special counsel here for oil and gas, would you like to address the specifics of, first off, the 2,500-foot setback that a couple different folks have asked about?
Sure. So setbacks are a difficult issue. The reality is that there are a number of studies that Commerce City has looked at, and those can be found in the record. They were referenced last year, and they can still be found in the record. Over 40 health studies, including the most recent, and I think probably the most important health study that was published last year in 2019 by the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. It was called the Human Health Risk Assessment for Oil and Gas Operations in Colorado. And they looked at a number of samples, hundreds of samples that were taken from both Garfield County on the western slope and in Weld County in 2014 and 2015. They analyzed those and found that the good news is that there's not any long-term health impact from oil and gas development that they could find, but there was the possibility of short-term acute health impacts. And these are the health impacts that is an hour or more where you're exposed to chemicals that could cause you skin rash, irritation, those types of issues, nosebleeds, and things that are more serious than that. This was modeled. They did not, they modeled that there was enough of the potential for impacts that could lead to health impacts as far as 2,000 feet away from homes. Again, they didn't find any, they didn't detect any of these chemicals more than 2,000 feet away from homes, or even 2,000 feet away from homes. It was all based on modeling, based on some of the studies that they did again in 2014 and 2015. And that's important. 2014 and 2015, there were different regulations in place, and certainly less protections in place on those locations than are being proposed here in Commerce City. The fact that Commerce City is looking at having everything go into pipelines and not having tanks, those types of protections are going to go a long way towards protecting the air quality of and safety of residents. Therefore, we came down, as Adams County did, doubling the current setback from the Colonial Gas Conservation Commission, which is currently at 500 feet, and more than doubling that because of the way that we're looking at assessing that setback from the property boundary of both the production pad and the residential lot.
Thank you, Matt. And I think, I want to be able to tackle the last question. Obviously, that last question seems to be more of a requested statement or opportunity for staff to go back and during our internal review process of all the feedback that we receive, to provide some additional insight or guidance to mayor, city council for them to be able to make an informed decision. So, what we will do is we will take that comment back about adding regulations that an operator cannot drill within an existing neighborhood, and we will present that information to our mayor and city council at the appropriate time when we're able to share the broader feedback during the public comment process. But I do appreciate the statement and the concern and the comment, and we'll make sure to wrap that into our evaluation process.
And unless Dominic has anything to add to that answer, I think we'll move along. One other quick reminder with regards to that topic as it relates to a question that was more related to a specific well pad is that there will also be dedicated public comment opportunities for each individual well pad whenever, if and when a well pad is to get to that point, there will be specific comment opportunities for each of those well pads. So just a quick reminder on that front as well. I think we wanted to address the concept of the alternative site analysis as well. Dominic, did you want to speak to that with relation to the setbacks here?
Yeah, I can kind of reiterate what was discussed during the presentation here too, is that the minimum setback that we're proposing is intended to be the minimum and not the specific setback location that every site is permitted at. So what we're intending to do is, through this alternative site analysis structure that we develop, is to look objectively at the specific site constraints that surround a certain facility. And if there are critical water facilities or a large significant proximity of homes, when it can be demonstrated through an alternative site analysis that there are other feasible potential locations where the mineral resources can reasonably be extracted, is the approach that we're taking with this draft. While the 1,000-foot setback is the minimum, the process that we're evaluating in terms of alternative site analysis is really designed to ensure that the sites that do go forward are the ones that are most protective of health, safety, and welfare in the environment.
All right, thank you, Dominic, for that description. Our next question asks, are updated regulations transparent, accurate, and will it reduce greenhouse gases and ozone air pollution? According to the State of the Air report by the American Lung Association, has reported Colorado as a top 10 state for worst air quality, graded with an F, failure to meet federal air safety standards. Dominic, would you like to start?
Yes. So as it pertains to the question regarding the updated regulations being transparent, accurate, and that of the sort, I do want to address that and say that as it pertains to any city regulation update, whether it's updates to commercial design standards or to oil and gas, What we try to do is we try to make our regulations as clear and concise as possible. We like to think that if any resident of the city or any other entity that wants to do business with the city wants to start a business and potentially do any of these types of uses, is that the code is clear enough where it's relatively easy to disseminate and understand the information that is being requested. From a public policy standpoint, that's something that we're always aiming to do as a city. I will strongly emphasize that if there are any specific comments that you have as it pertains to making the regulations more transparent and clear in a way that it's easy to understand, we are certainly willing to take that feedback and ways to make that a little bit more clear. Some other ways that we've done this in our department, aside from oil and gas, is creating informational fire sheets and what we call facts to knows, which outline the exact process for how to move forward with a potential application and to understand the implications of such regulations. As it pertains to the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and ozone air pollution, we are aware that the Denver metro area is in a non-attainment status. And if you look at some of the specific air quality regulations that we're looking at, including air quality monitoring, electric drilling equipment, all of that type of stuff should have a significant reduction in the overall emissions that are generated from these sites. So as it pertains to site-specific and somewhat local air quality impacts, these sites should be significantly reduced in their air impact for adjacent residences and a number of those other things. As it pertains to regional impacts, that's something that the Air Quality Control Division and the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment is sorting through in their rulemaking processes. But as it pertains to the regulations that are proposed within this draft, is looking more at the direct impact from these facilities and reducing those emissions.
All right, did anybody else on the panel care to address that topic? And
I think Dominic answered it in full.
okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the next one then. Our next question is actually a series of questions. So I'm going to break these out for the panel so they can individually answer, as these topics don't always necessarily go perfectly together, all contained within one question. So the first question with related again to the city's updated oil and gas regulations in the Land Development Code. The question is, why are the penalties for code violations so insignificant?
So I'll go ahead and kick that answer off or response off, Travis. So in regards to why the penalties for code violations are so insignificant, I wouldn't categorize it as insignificant as to that we are patterning our penalties for code violations to how we look at enforcement within our municipal code for other non-compliance. If you look at our current structure, it's very consistent with that. And it's how we are looking equitably at how we treat oil and gas industry with other industries within the boundaries of Commerce City.
All right, thank you, Jason. The next segment of this question is related to the language of the way some of the regulations or this content is written. And the question is, why is everything listed as, quote unquote, to the maximum extent practicable, instead of just saying no if something is harmful to residents? So this gets into a little bit of the nuance of the way some terminology goes in. Matt Sura, would you care to answer that?
Yeah, happy to. Thanks for the question. So the term maximum extent practicable means that they need to use all efforts. So maximum extent practicable is used in the code under lighting. The maximum extent practicable lighting shall be downcast, meaning that it may not be practicable, it may not be safe to have lighting downcast at all times. There may need to be in some instance where the lighting needs to be slightly cast in a way that is going to cover more territory. Another place where the term maximum extent practicable is used is in the BMP document. There's that they need to control dust to the maximum extent practicable. And this is a good instance in that if you had a hard and fast rule that they must have no dust, that could mean that they need to pave their entire road and their entire well pad to avoid all dust. And that's, again, not practicable and frankly wasteful and would result in greater land disturbance and greater environmental impacts. So there are, in key places, choices where we use the term to the maximum extent practicable to give, to be reasonable and to allow for the greatest protections that are possible, frankly.
Thank you, Matt. The next section here is regarding cumulative effects of oil and gas wells. So the question is, why are you not considering the cumulative effects of so many oil wells in such a small area?
As it pertains to cumulative effects and cumulative impacts, we know that the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission will be taking this up in their future rulemakings. We are really waiting to see where they go with those proposed regulations. And additionally, the city has engaged as a party to the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission rulemakings to be involved in how some of that language is ultimately finalized and approved. We are analyzing cumulative impacts potentially as it pertains to sites that might be in the city in terms of a number of provisions. So that is something that we are considering, although it might not be spelled out and delineated as cumulative effects and impacts. This is something that we are monitoring and watching and seeing how other local jurisdictions address this, and particularly how the state addresses this. This could be something that is included, if is not specifically stated out in these regulations, in future updates. As we are updating the land development code with the number of significant provisions that we're proposing as a city here, this isn't the final time that the regulations could be amended or changed.
All right, thank you, Dominic. And just for the person who asked that question, I know you had one more question in there that we're going to lump in with another group here that's upcoming. Again, if you're just joining us here on the meeting, again, thank you for being here for Commerce City's Oil and Gas Virtual Town Hall. We are answering at this point in the meeting pre-submitted questions. I know the clock is moving quickly, so we're going to keep on rolling here and try to get through as many as we can, and then we will take live questions here shortly as well. So for our panel, this is a group of questions now that we're going to put together because they all kind of revolve around really two primary levels of interest with this topic. So I'm going to go through these questions and then you guys can jump in. One question we have is, given the current climate with this industry, why are we pursuing regulations? Shouldn't we be holding off until things normalize and then go from there? Another question is, can we just pause this until we get back to normal? Why do we need to stress over this danger while also worrying about COVID-19? Don't we have enough to worry about? Even the COGCC is taking a break. Another question is, since the oil and gas industry isn't making money right now, should the city be dependent on their promises to pay? Seems like we should be embracing other industries, retail, grocery stores. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Why are you bending over backwards to have this industry in our neighborhoods when people have been asking for restaurants and retail, not oil wells? And then finally, what are your plans for orphan wells if drilling begins and companies go out of business. This needs to be addressed in your regulations. Who will pay for this? So there are a couple of overriding themes, I think, there that we want to address here amongst our panel. One of which is more related to what we are experiencing right now with regards to the COVID-19 outbreak and how that's affecting everybody's operations across the board. And then secondly, maybe regarding the wisdom of allowing oil and gas or the financial state of that industry.
Okay. So let me tackle the first couple of questions in regards to the current climate, normalization, and ultimately the promise to pay and not putting our eggs in all in one basket. I think, and obviously the COVID-19 crisis, because obviously that's very present, and we're obviously all trying to navigate a very unprecedented time. But I think even with the current climate with oil and gas, and obviously there's been made mention of a number of different articles and obviously other information that gets shared. But I think it's prudent for us all to be aware that I know the comment was made that even COGCC is taking a break. Well, the COGCC has actually extended its timelines and it's still proceeding forward with its rulemaking mission changes. And I believe also, given that our current land development code still allows for the processing and acceptance and ultimately demonstration of various criteria under our current code, the approval of oil and gas permit or land uses. So for us, and the direction that we've received is to, continue to move forward due diligently with updating our land development code and being able to provide both the research, the quantitative research and the analysis that Matt Sura has shared, very early on, and similarly with Dominic during his presentation, but also the qualitative feedback to our council so they can make that informed decision. I will say that the city, as it relates to putting all of our eggs in one basket, there is assurances that we have crafted within the financial assurance section of our code for them to be responsive and responsible for moving forward with their efforts or their projects here in the city. I would also say that, we have a very diverse strategy, which is also obviously outlined in our economic development strategy, that looks at how we try to balance fiscally and try to attract a number of different economic, but also job creating solutions for the city. As it relates to COVID-19, once again, we have extended, obviously, as we've been navigating this issue, the timeline and our approach and process, given obviously the collaboration and the feedback that we've been seeking from the community. And obviously that could continue to modulate and change, go forward based on the direction that we receive. So we are navigating due diligence, and we're navigating a very sensitive topic right now in being able to make sure that we're receiving and providing as much information to the community.
And I can answer the question as it pertains to the orphan well scenario. So we do have a requirement prior to an operator commencing construction within this draft that they have to post financial assurances and a bond of some kind. That's prorated on the number of wells on a well site that would need to account for any specific instances where there's a financial setback and plugging and abandoning any wells and those types of things.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. We are nearing the end of the pre-submitted questions, so very soon we should be getting to live questions for those folks who are on the call. We appreciate you waiting patiently. So we just have a couple of more questions that were pre-submitted in writing. The next two questions are quite related, and in fact, I believe that this is probably going to fall more within Matt Sura's area of expertise, given your background with this topic, Matt Sura. So the first question is, the most important thing to me is air, water, and land contamination. We need daily inspections on every site to make sure this doesn't become an issue. The next question related is, groundwater contamination needs to be addressed. If this industry has a leak or something goes wrong and groundwater is contaminated, what is the city going to do? How are you planning to protect us in your regulations, since our homes are our most valuable asset?
Okay, those are great points. So initially, I could say that I agree with that's exactly the approach that Commerce City is taking, that our air and our water and our land and preventing any contamination is foremost in these code revisions. I don't think that daily inspections are necessary, although frequent inspections certainly will be needed, particularly during the drilling and completion phase, because that's when most accidents occur and contamination is most likely, although still very unlikely. I can say that the code is written to go well beyond state standards. An example being that the state doesn't require that a tank battery would have an impervious layer under it to prevent leaking into groundwater. That is something that is required in Commerce City, and as I mentioned, it's likely that those tanks will never have anything in them because we are also requiring pipelines. So there is a number of other steps that the city has taken, including setbacks from groundwater sources. Public water supply that comes from groundwater is going to be protected within Commerce City. And in fact, Commerce City is going even farther in pushing for those same types of protections at the Colorado Gas Conservation Commission, because groundwater, we don't want groundwater to be polluted anywhere near Commerce City, because if we depend on groundwater, we don't want it contaminated just outside of Commerce City and Adams County, as an example.
Thank you very much, Matt, for that background. And this would be our final pre-submitted question. It's actually two questions, neither of which is directly related to the city's land development code updates, but just more of a much larger picture about this topic of oil and gas as a whole. I think Jason Rogers, Community Development Director, this may fall more within your wheelhouse, a big picture overview. So one question we have from Natalie here. Natalie, thank you for the question. How can we put more pressure on lawmakers to aggressively move away from fossil fuels and toward 100% renewables? And then another similar question from Morgan. Why waste our money on dirty, unhealthy, unprofitable oil and gas extraction as opposed to investing in reforestation and renewable energy efforts?
Thank you, Travis. I mean, obviously, as staff, we are guided by the policies, the regulations, and obviously the structure of our organization to guide our actions in review and development of policies that present obviously the protections of our residents, and obviously the effective use of land and operations of various operations and land uses within the city's boundaries. I would say to the two questions, and I can only speak from my professional opinion, is that obviously we have elected bodies that are there to serve and there to hear, and obviously take the feedback that you provide and to, once again, respond to those questions. And I would direct you to, once again, put your comments in writing, to put your questions in writing to your elected officials, not both only at the local, but at the state level as well, in regards to receiving those responses. And then obviously as staff, we follow the direction that we receive in being able to develop what is in the best interest for the city from our both elected and appointed officials.
All right, thank you, Jason. And that, unless anybody else has any more comment from the panel, that will bring us to the end of our pre-submitted written questions. There were two other submissions that came in right before the meeting started. However, both of those were more statements of commentary rather than questions. Sorry, Jason.
So Travis, I do have just one update, and I'll say, it was actually one of the things that we did discuss at this previous city council meeting were other environmental initiatives that have, started to take a hold in Commerce City as it relates to being more active. And obviously that's the direction that we receive from our elected officials based on the feedback and the input that they receive from their constituents. So there is a level of activity, and I say, once again, reach out to those appropriate individuals to share your thoughts and your feedback and your concerns. And then obviously we work internally to be able to deliver on the questions that are posed to us. So I did want to make note of that because it is something that has, as staff, we've been responding to based on feedback that has been directed to at least the local elected officials. And obviously we want to be able to respond to that. But that would be your best avenue.
All right, thank you very much, Jason. So that brings us to the end of our pre-submitted written questions. So again, for those of you on the line, we appreciate you hanging on for us in order to be able to ask live questions. So as we move on here to the opportunity to ask those live questions, I would like to just remind everyone of a couple of things. First off is that, we are already working against the clock a little bit. There are a number of folks who have signed up to ask a question. What I would ask of you is that if you asked a question or indicated on your registration form that you would like to ask a question, but if you feel that we've already addressed it or that the question has already been answered, I would encourage you to go ahead and forego that opportunity, as I'm not thinking we're going to be able to get through everyone who is on this list in front of me. Again, I would remind you this meeting is primarily focused on opportunities to learn more about the regulations, better understand what the city has done here, what the process is like, reasoning behind some of those decisions. This is less about statements of testimony or providing your comment and your feelings and your opinions on those regulations. Again, if you'd like to do that, we do have the official public comment form for the updated regulations on the website at c3gov.com/oil-gas. Remember that any commentary you provide during this meeting will not go into the official public record for the public comment period. So if you have those records or those comments that you want to go into the record, I encourage you to do that through the online form. You can also testify in person when the regulations go before the Planning Commission and the City Council. So I would encourage you, if you want to simply comment and state your opinions, I would offer that this may not be the best way to do that, and we want to make sure we answer as many questions as possible. So please be mindful of our time constraints as you're asking your questions. The way we're going to do this, since we do have so many people that have signed up, and I'm going to try to keep everyone straight on our roster of folks who have signed up to speak. So what I'm going to do here is, for those folks who have signed up to speak, I'm going to read 3 names at a time. If I read your name, this is going to be in the order that the questions were submitted. If you can raise your hand when I call your name, that'll help me find people quickly and move you forward. So the first 3 names we have are Shayna Oliver, Rana Sanchez, and Phil Noble. If you 3 could raise your hands, we'll get started right into the question and answer session. Shayna Oliver, you are up first. I believe I have found you, and you are unmuted if you'd like to ask your question.
All right, yes. I am an indigenous enrolled tribal member of the Navajo Nation, and for this industry to undermine health impacts and air pollution, to still move forward with oil and gas is really unsettling for the time that we're living in right now. Because the residents of Commerce City have suffered the burden of air pollution from Suncor refinery. That puts their health, my health at risk. And it's been for decades that this air pollution from oil and gas activities will only add more to the existing air quality problem and further impact residents' health as well as mine, such as increasing the risk and impacts to vulnerable populations such as children, pregnant women, people of color, older adults, and people with underlying health conditions that live in these communities. And to allow another corporate polluter to inflict more environmental injustice into this community is irresponsible. And I want to know how you're going to address 1261.
And I'm not entirely certain, 1261, if any, let us, can you describe what exactly that means again? Shana?
It's the House bill that that was passed by legislation last year to reduce
Sure. Senate Bill
emissions
181?
by science-based targets.
Okay.
And how will this industry address the need to really drastically reduce emissions and to implement these permits and to allow them to be in these dense areas, especially when we're already receiving air pollution at our worst levels. I think it's just really irresponsible that you're not addressing this question of how you're gonna address 1261 in reducing emissions going forward.
Okay, thank you, Shana. In the interest of time, I'm going to stop you there and see. Matt Sura, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I can say that it's a good point. I think 1261 is important legislation that is going to be taken up by the Air Quality Control Commission first and foremost, and we'll be looking for direction from the state as to how to best reduce emissions generally, not just in the oil and gas sector, but all sectors, to be able to achieve those targets.
All right, thank you, Matt. So again, the next few speakers, so we've got Rana Sanchez, Phil Noble, and Christy Douglas. If you are on the call, please raise your hand and I will do my best to find you and we'll try to keep this moving. So I believe that Rana Sanchez is now unmuted. And Rana, you have the floor.
My question's already been answered.
Okay, thank you very much, Rana. So Phil Noble would be our next panelist, and I do not see Phil Noble with a hand up at this time. So Phil, if you are here, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll see if we can find you. Christy Douglas, Phil Noble, Christy Douglas, Dean Johnson, and Carly Seller would be our next folks in line. So Phil Noble, if you are there, feel free to raise your hand. And I believe we've got Christy Douglas on the line now, if I'm not mistaken, along with Steve Douglas. Are you there? You have the floor.
Yes. So I would like to know how you can justify industrializing a community. I do not understand this. I don't know why we're not fighting back against this. And I would like to know what the justification is and why we have been targeted as a community. If this were a more wealthy area of the Denver metro area, people would be coming out and screaming bloody murder and they would be going elsewhere. But that's not happening here in Commerce City. And I want to know why the people who are representing us are not fighting to keep this kind of industry, and it's a very dangerous and toxic industry, out of our neighborhoods.
So, Ms. Douglas, thank you very much for the comment and the question. And so I will try to frame this for you. Obviously, we as staff, one, obviously we're operating under the guidance and direction that we receive as it relates to, once again, updating our land development code to address the opportunities that have been afforded to us under SB 181. As it relates to your question about industrializing the city, unfortunately, I can't speak on behalf of our elected or appointed officials. And I think that's a comment that it would be best directed towards them at the appropriate time when this matter goes forward. My question to you would be to understand the basis of your question about how that applies to the technical development of regulations and standards that we are bringing forward, or ultimately will be bringing forward to council for their determination.
All right, thank you, Jason. And let's see here. We're going to go to the next couple folks on our list here. So Dean Johnson, Carly Seller, Mandy Ulmer, Susan Cabral are our next folks who are up to answer questions. So if you can just please raise your hand if I just called your name. We will keep moving down the list. We also have Jan Rose, and we have Steve Douglas here coming up. And so, all right, as I'm still attempting to find folks here, we're going to go ahead and jump. I already had you, Steve Douglas, up there, so we'll go ahead and bring you back and let you ask your question, and we'll keep looking for those other folks. Please raise your hand if I've called your name. Mr. Douglas, you have the floor.
Hey, thank you, Travis. I appreciate this coming up as far as the town hall. I wish that this was pushed to months down the road, putting the citizens and the businesses of Commerce City first because of the COVID virus. A lot of businesses are hurting right now, and the oil and gas is hurting. And this industry right now does not need this kind of attention. So my question is, so far, is how much money has the city spent to date on this oil and gas, as far as giving them the amount of attention they have, focusing on the rulemaking, paying for attorney fees. We just had new leadership employed in Commerce City that has been all attention has been put on oil and gas, and also about reverse setbacks. There shouldn't be any type of development at all near any existing oil and gas. Our oil and gas right now, when it comes to proposals, are based on the county when they already have oil and gas development and we don't. So how are you going to tackle that going forward? And then we talked about setbacks. What about blast zones? Have we considered blast zones? I saw the illustration of Brighton with the two communities on the side, and that really was related to the start of wells and then the incompletion of wells over a set of time. When I look at that illustration, I look at the blast zone, and I'm referring to Firestone when that happened. So could you answer those questions, please?
Travis, I can take that last one on the blast zones. That is something that we took a hard look at. One of the studies that I referenced that is, in the record of the 40 health-related studies that we looked at were specifically around blast zones. Really, one of the reasons that we're looking at greater setback and also reverse setbacks, because we don't want residences, as you mentioned, to be dangerously close to oil and gas facilities. Having said that, oil and gas facilities, once they get through the drilling and completion phase, they go into a production phase, particularly if there's no petrochemicals stored there whatsoever, because that oil and gas is being piped from that facility. It represents much less danger for any types of explosions or fire.
Okay, thank you, Matt. And once again, folks, that it's your opportunity. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand if you can using the raise your hand function. Phil Noble, Dean Johnson, Carly Seller, Mandy Ulmer, Susan Cabral, Jan Rose. I have found Carly Seller. And you are unmuted. Carly, the floor is yours. Carly, it is your turn to speak. If you'd like, you should be unmuted. Carly Seller. All right, Carly, let us know if you come back and we can try that again. In the meantime, we'll try to keep going down the list here.
Travis, very quickly, I don't want Mr. Douglas's question to go unanswered. As it relates to your question about attention and focus on this industry of interest, I would submit respectfully that we as staff are tasked to be able to provide a comprehensive and a holistic view of land use and development within the city. With that, we ensure that we bring awareness and that we bring civic engagement and participation at the various stages of what's been asked of us to be able to bring forward for some level of discussion, evaluation, and ultimate decision to be made. Whether that be a residential project versus an industrial project versus a commercial project or a signature project within an area that may be catalytic to redevelopment. We make sure that we are investing our time to provide the regulatory and policy-based discussion for both our appointed and elected officials. So I would say that we are, once again, at a principal position trying to ensure the civic engagement and participation necessary in being able to allow for, once again, our final decision makers to make informed decisions at the appropriate times that are dictated by timelines and schedules that we help to collaborate, to coordinate with a multitude of different bodies, both public and private, both public interest and private stakeholdership as well. But thank you very much for your question.
All right, thank you, Jason. And Carly Seller, do we have you there now? Would you care to ask your question?
So Travis, Carly has written her question in the Zoom chat.
Oh, hey, there we go. Thank you, Jason, for that. I missed that. Apologies, Carly. Thank you, Jason. My question is 150 wells are deemed complete and the new ordinance will not even apply. How does that protect the health and safety and well-being of your citizens? I don't know why you didn't hear me. Sorry and thanks. And sorry, Carly, that I did not see that sooner. But again, how does that protect the health and safety and well-being of your citizens with regard to the 150 wells and the applications that have already been deemed complete?
So I can chime in on this one. As it pertains to the deemed complete, and as it pertains to the extraction oil and gas sites that are under the regional operator agreement, what we did is when we were crafting these new regulations, is if you look at where we ended up with our regional operator agreement, at the time that document was being negotiated and the passing of Senate Bill 181, we did end up getting to a relatively close position as to the protections that the city was gaining from the agreement and where we are today with our regulations. If you really compare and contrast where those two documents lie, there's not a significant difference. There are some additional protections as technology increases and we gain more understanding of some of the capabilities that are included within these regulations and where the state is going. So I would say as it pertains to those wells that have been deemed complete, what we'll see with the new adopted regulations or the new regulations, if they do get adopted, is they should be relatively similar in terms of health, safety, and general welfare protections. They're generally equivalent and have a lot of similarities. There are some areas as it pertains to the alternative site analysis and some other additional protections that we're including in terms of water setbacks. Those are all things that we looked at when discussing the location of some of these wells and should be comparatively similar. in that regard.
All right, thank you, Dominic. And we now have Lois Vanderkoy. So Lois, I have promoted you to a panelist in the meeting. And if you're ready to go, you are unmuted.
Oh, okay. Yeah, hi. I wasn't expecting. I just had
Sorry, I
submitted
hadn't called your
something
name in
online.
advance. Sorry about that.
Okay. Yeah, well, I can ask. I wonder again about the setbacks, because my understanding of the state study that Matt Sura talked about was that they didn't really look beyond 2,000 feet. And they also didn't look at factors such as well density, which there are a number of studies which show that the more dense the wells are in a community, the more likely there are infant impacts. So I just wonder if that piece could be looked at again, so that you do get adequate setbacks that indeed protect health and safety. Thanks. Hello?
Hello.
Yeah, sorry, Lois. And anybody, thank you for that question. We did hear that. And is anyone on the panel prepared to address Lois's question?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I heard a question, but I agree that that density, the number of wells that are in the area, you know, we're not taken into account with the CDPHE study that I referenced, and you know, this is going to be an ongoing discussion, I think, among all local governments and throughout the state as to what is appropriate, and you know. The city was given direction to, you know, to at 1,000 feet, recognizing that it is well beyond what is required currently at the state, and you know, would certainly welcome any additional evidence that you have or any comments that you would like to put into the record. Thanks.
Okay, I'll plan to send you a document, perhaps, if that would be helpful.
So yeah, Lois, I'll kind of expand on that. I would say that yes, providing some sort of written documentation on the city's website is exactly what we're looking for in terms of providing specific feedback that we can review. I want to jump into process a little bit as well. So kind of where we're at with the regulations, we have our initial staff draft that was released. We're not intending that this draft is going to be the ultimate final version that is brought before council. We're going to continue to work and refine that draft. We're planning to host at least one more study session with council where we'll be looking at the specific feedback that's been given. And this might be, as it pertains to setbacks, another item that could be discussed further if necessary, based on the responses that we get from citizen feedback.
All right, thank you, Dominic. And our next few folks up on the list here, Leslie Wise, Philip Doe, Patricia Murray, Lucy Molina, Edith Henke. If any of you are on the phone, please raise your hand and we'll work on getting to you soon, or excuse me, on the phone or in the Zoom meeting. Patricia Murray, I believe we found you. You would be up next. And if you're ready, you are unmuted.
Oh, very quickly, though.
Thank you.
Very quickly, apology, Ms. Murray, but I do want to make a comment that I know we're coming up on the 7:30 hour. I would like to know that we are going to continue past that up to at least 8 to continue taking questions from attendees. So I just wanted to put that out there for all who are still on the Zoom call.
Thank you, Jason. And yes, good point. As 7:30 is fast approaching here, we will continue on here and try to get to as many of your questions as possible. So go ahead, Patricia Murray, you are up.
Yes, I am unmuted. Okay, a number of comments have come up since I've listened to your whole hearing today. It appears that 99% of the people do not want oil and gas drilling in Commerce City. However, if you own, we have 160 acres, our neighbor has 80 acres, and we want to put in a pad site, and Commerce City says, no, you cannot, then that is a taking. You are taking my property rights away, and according to the Supreme Court ruling a year ago, you will have to pay me for my lost property rights. So if you're going to pay me, that's fine. And they're valued very, very high. However, I would prefer to have my pad site, get our wells drilled. Yes, they will all be in pipelines. There will be no above ground storage, and we would be very, very safe. And we're more than 1,000 feet from the nearest dwelling. Let me go to the next question. Okay, that's a comment. My next question is,
So if you could take
okay,
the question, please.
you have Commerce City regulations, and then you have Adams County regulations. Which ones do we have to abide by? We're in Commerce City.
Thank you for the question, Patricia.
So thank you once again, Ms. Murray. The answer would be Commerce City regulations would apply given it's within our municipal boundaries.
All right, thank you very much, Jason. Next up, we do have Lucy Molina in the call, and I see she is here and ready to go. So Lucy, the floor is yours. If you are indeed there, you look like you are unmuted, but we can't hear you right now, Lucy. Oh, there we go. We'll look in the. All right, and Lucy, feel free to try and submit that question another way. As we are not able to hear you, let me give a few more names here for some folks upcoming who can ask questions. Once again, Edith Henke, Patricia Ramsey, Carla Teal, Jesse Aguilar, Chase Janis. These are all folks who can be coming up here shortly as well. I believe I see Jesse Aguilar here on the phone. And if that is you, Jesse, is that you? Oh, perhaps not. All right, we'll keep going. Patrick Ramsey, Edith Henke, Carla Teal, Chase Janis. I don't see if you folks. Again, if I've called your name, please raise your hand in the call. Julie Salvat, I believe, has been here, and she's had her hand raised previously. So Julie, you are unmuted, and the floor is yours if you'd like to ask your question.
Yes, throughout this presentation, I haven't heard anything about a hydrology report, or if we even have, I'm guessing you're going to be accessing the aquifers. And what is this going to look like for Colorado, as well as Commerce City and Adams County? Haven't heard anything about water, and that's huge because I think people do not realize how much water is utilized in a fracking procedure. So I'd really like some discussion about water.
Thank you, Julie.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. You're right. Hydraulic fracturing does use quite a bit of water, typically over 5 million gallons per well. And that water is coming from out of Commerce City. Typically, it's going to be piped, so there's not going to be water trucks and that is going to be required within the code and best management practices. And the water then is going to be taken away. Anything that comes back up, and Commerce City currently does not allow for injection wells, so that is going to have to go to another type of disposal facility outside of the city limits. I did mention that we're also requiring setbacks from public drinking water wells, which is something that the state doesn't do currently. And so Commerce City is doing that, you know, in one of the first places in the state to protect municipal drinking water supply.
All right, thank you, Matt. And we have, I know a couple more.
One other item, Travis, if I can jump in, one other item that I do want to add to that is that in terms of the city's water supply, in terms of the equivalent residential units and the water that's dedicated to the city and our reserves would not be available for operators to utilize.
All right, thank you, Dominic. And again, for folks who are looking to ask questions, I've got Tim Rempel and Fran Aguirre coming up here shortly as well. Looking for MR Swenson, Sonia Kudig, Chase Janis. Those are all folks that as well, if you want to raise your hand, we'll get to you as well here soon. And for the moment, we have Tim Rempel. And Tim, if you're ready to go, the floor is yours.
Yes, real quick, two questions. One of which you touched on a bit, and it has to do with at the end of the productive life about retiring the wells. And obviously, the more wells you drill, the more it's going to be an issue. Who pays to retire those and do that safely? I'm 2 people removed from the folks that perished in Firestone in a house explosion. So that's an issue that's near and dear to me. Second question, it's on a very different vein, is one of the big issues with fracking and gas development in general is methane escape all across the entire lifespan from when they start to when it finally gets capped. What specifically is going to be done to monitor the actual methane emissions and track that? And let me leave that there. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question, Tim.
Tim, I will answer your second question. Methane capture is extremely important, not only to Commerce City, but to the state. New regulations that were passed in December are requiring new and more frequent leak detection and repair. It's typically done with a infrared camera that they take out there, and that is something that we are requiring increased frequencies for leak detection and repair, and we, as we mentioned already, continuous monitoring for every site. That is something that goes well beyond state regulations. In terms of your question around orphan wells, I can start us off there, and there might be another one that this is something that Dominic might cover. Orphan wells is an important issue, and making sure that there's adequate bonding in place is something that the city has looked into and is considering to work through. State bonding levels, that's really more of the appropriate place where the bonding should occur. But if it doesn't occur at the state level, that is going to be something that Commerce City is going to have to look hard at.
All right, thank you, Matt. And now we do have Fran Aguirre. You are in as a panelist. And Fran, if you're ready to ask your question, you are unmuted. Oh, no, you're not. Bear with me here one moment. And you should be able to, all right. Should be able to unmute there, Fran. All right, Fran, we'll get back to you as well. And I think we have Marianne Castaneda. You were on the list. I'm not sure that I called your name previously, but Marianne, if you are there, you're unmuted and you're ready to go.
My question was about waste disposal. And there's a loophole in Colorado law that allows those fracking sites to take their waste and dump it anywhere in the state. And what I really want to know as I've listened to this is all this double talk that I'm hearing. I heard it from the state, in the counties, and I've spent 9 months talking to people. I've even talked to janitors in the buildings. I've been in my car. I've traveled hundreds of miles. I can't get answers. So since these wells are the responsibility of Commerce City, since they are in your municipality, who is going to be the person that we can call or send a question to that's going to give us a dependable answer and not send us someplace else? The yes or no man, the one that has the information, put in simple terms, not in double talk.
Okay, thank you, Marianne, for your thoughts there.
And if I may ask Ms. Castaneda to follow up with that question, because I am not clear on particularly what particular information and or that you're looking for. So if you could just provide some clarity, that would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, for example, if I wanted to know about who monitors the waste, and so I call your office and you tell me to call the state, and then the state says call Tri-County, and then they say no, it's Commerce City. We get passed around and our questions aren't really answered. So if you have a panel that's going to answer our questions, and I'm assuming that's what we're doing right now, then I need to know where can I go to that person will find out for me exactly what I need to know.
I can take a stab at starting that. So Commerce City, and you can find a lot of this in great detail in the best management practices document, is going to be requiring nearly 30 different plans as part of an application, an oil and gas application. One is a waste management plan. And so Commerce City is going, again, well beyond the state and requiring a very explicit plans as to how the operations are going to occur and what protections are going to be in place. And in the case management, or the waste management plan in this case, they are going to know exactly where that waste is taken and the haul routes that they're using. There's an excellent staff. The local government designee is Dominic, and Dominic has been very open and willing to answer questions when they come to him from the public.
And I will add to that. I think as the local government designee, if there are specific questions about to a specific oil and gas location and where waste may be transmitted, and I know that some of these oil and gas permits, if anyone has had the opportunity to look at them, can be relatively lengthy and thousands of pages of information, which can be rather challenging to look through sometimes. So I think that calling into our planning department and asking specific questions, we'll always give it our best shot to explain what might be occurring. We might not have all the answers, but again, if there's someone that our Tri-County Health Department or the Colorado Division of Waste Management or something along those lines that can answer those types of questions, we're certainly happy to facilitate that discussion. And I will mention that, as Matt Sura mentioned, the waste management plans that are included with these oil and gas permits will be prescriptive enough to understand where waste is going and what's being required and all of that. As it pertains to the city, there are a number of prohibitions on waste collection and prohibition on injection wells and a number of things as it relates to waste being within the city boundaries.
All right, thank you, Dominic. And again, for all of our attendees, we appreciate you sticking with us here, getting those questions answered. We are running out of time a little bit. We're going to continue to answer as many as we can. However, this webinar is scheduled to end. The program itself has to end at 8 o'clock. So we're going to get through as many folks as possible right up until that time. Next, we're going to go to Lisa Olson, followed by Rita Shirley and Sarah Hirsch. So Lisa, if you are up and ready to go, Lisa Olson, you are ready to go, and the floor is yours. All right, and Lisa, we cannot hear you right now. And all right, so let's go ahead and go to Rita Shirley. Rita, if you are there, you are good to go, and you're up.
Hello. I'm curious. It seems like we're still putting money into an old industry. It's like when cars came out, people wanted to still put money into horses and buggies. And I see oil and gas kind of like that. It's an old industry that's been around a long time. And I wonder if Commerce City is putting energy and money and planning into something that's kind of passé, and if we can't look to the future and what's going to be better for the planet. And anyway, that's my question. Why are we in this old industry, not a new one?
So, Ms. Shirley, thank you very much for your question. I think prudent to share with you. Obviously, we at the city obviously don't drive the market, don't drive the economy, or the trends in which once again govern private activity. We are obviously tasked to be able to respond to various trends, development trends, land use trends, both in existence and or those that may come to us in the future as we start to look to develop policy and rules and regulations in place. This is no different, that we are responding obviously to an industry of interest, like no other one, that we once again provide the same similar development of policies and regulations for the protections of our residents and corporate citizens, and ultimately allowing for the effective operation through various performance or bulk dimensional standards that we have to outline for them to be able to operate. So we respond, and then we ultimately try to help govern through our zoning police powers the effective use of those that demonstrate an interest within Commerce City.
All right, thank you for that reply. Now, next up, we'll go to Sarah Hirsch. And Sarah, if you are ready to go, you're unmuted.
Okay. Yeah, I wonder, even though we do know that oil and gas is really polluting our atmosphere, it's also economically losing its feasibility. It is, why would Commerce City want to pursue an industry like fracking that is shown again and again to lose money, not be profitable, and also highly pollutive to the area that it's fracked in? It is time to reinvest in new energy sources and with more economic incentive for people to have a lower impact on the planet.
Thank you, Ms. Hirsch. I think, your comment, your question, is in the same context of my previous response. Obviously, we as the city have a very strong economic development plan that obviously looks at a diversity of uses. And once again, as we think about, to your question about environmental initiatives going forward, the city is forward thinking in identifying opportunities to allow for those that may want to develop and bring those initiatives forward within the city, and how to be able to operate under such guidelines, rules, regulations, and policies. But at the same time, as the private market that drives itself, we have to be able to respond, and we want to make sure that we have the appropriate safeguards, both from a policy and a regulatory standpoint, in place to ensure both the effective operation of that use. Once again, could be residential, could be commercial, could be industrial, but ultimately at the same time, wanting to make sure that it's able to mitigate the various impacts that come through that use's operations within our boundaries.
All right, thank you, Jason. And we're going to get to another question here from Ruthie Rockwell in just a moment. I understand that Mayor Huseman is on the line for the webinar and would like to make a comment as well. So Mayor Huseman, just allow me one moment to get you teed up here, and we will let you go ahead and make those comments. So Mayor Huseman, you're up.
Thanks, sir. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're a little quiet, but yes.
All right, sorry, I was also on the AdCog town hall earlier, so doing double duty tonight. So I'm using my Surface here, so I apologize if the audio is a little unclear. I wanted to respond to Marianne. I hope you're still on the line regarding who do you call? And you're absolutely correct. If you call Commerce City right now, we're going to tell you to call Tri-County Health. If you call Tri-County Health, they're going to tell you to call CDPHE. CDPHE is probably going to refer you to the EPA or refer you right back to Commerce City. And we're all going to struggle with how do we get an answer on this. So about 4 months ago, I sat down with the city manager and said, look, we need to have an environmental engineer on staff, and we need somebody who can take that call, who can make those calls out to the other agencies and basically speak in that type of language so that we can give the residents a straight answer without referring them to other agencies. I despise the idea that anytime somebody calls and has a question about Suncor, has a question about this or any other environmental related thing, that we constantly say, you got to call so-and-so. So about 2 months ago, they drafted up a statement of work and put it out on the street to hire an environmental engineering firm that will serve twofold. One, help us stand up the environmental engineering program so that we can actually have that person on staff to be able to do that. And two, determine how it is that we can hire a person who is qualified to do what it is we're trying to do. So we're working through that to avoid the issue where you call the city and the city turns around and says, no, you need to call Tri-County Health, you need to call CDPHE, you need to call whoever, because that is unacceptable. So I did want to respond on that, which is why I requested permission to do that. Secondly, to Ms. Hirsch, you said, why is the city pursuing this? We're not. As a city, we did not contact an operator and say, hey, please come drill in Commerce City. Nobody has reached out and said, you know what, we think we have oil underneath our ground. Let's have them come in and extract it for us. You heard earlier from a landowner who is adamant that she wants to be able to put wells on her property. And she looks at it as the denying of her being able to install those wells is a taking and is threatening legal action for the fact that you are not allowing her to use her property and citing Supreme Court case law to say that that's the way it is. You know, we have landowners who are out there. One of the biggest ones is Fulham Water Company. They know they have oil underneath their ground and they want to extract that oil and they want to use that money to pay for things that they want to do. So it's not a matter of Commerce City going out and saying, we're going to pursue this industry. It's a matter of the industry coming to the landowners and landowners saying, we want to pursue this. Commerce City, you have to allow us to do it. And the best thing we can do at this point is to minimize the risk to our residents. And that is a stance that we took 2.5 years ago. And that is a stance that we are continuing to take today. How do we work with the best interest of all of Commerce City while minimizing the impact of all the residents? So I thank you everybody for participating in this call. It's been very informative. I've appreciated hearing the comments and the questions that everybody has. If you have additional questions or you'd like to reach out to me directly, please don't hesitate to do so. I'm always available to answer any questions you may have. Thank you. Have a good night.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Huseman. And I would like to try to get to Susan Sieb or Sieb. I'm not sure. I believe you're joining us via phone. So Susan, if you're ready, we're running short on time, but I'd love to get your question answered here. Are you there, Susan? You're unmuted. All right, Susan, we cannot hear you. Let's see. Let's do it this way. Well, let's see here. I'm going to try to get another question in if we can, to the extent possible. Galena Nickel, Ronald Bruce, Olga Gonzalez, Catherine Beerline, Jamie Smith. If I just called your name, feel free to raise your hand. And I do not have any hands raised from those folks. All right. Oh, Susan, are you there? Susan Seib? No, perhaps not. Okay. We do have Councilwoman Susan Noble in on the call here, who has her hand raised. So we're going to bring her in. And Councilwoman Noble, we're running short on time, but we have a couple of minutes here.
Yes, thank you very much. I just wanted to follow up on Mayor Huseman's comments and to say that there are multiple views of how to approach the oil and gas initiatives that are planned or proposed for Commerce City. And I, for one, am extremely grateful to have had the opportunity to listen to so many of you who have called into this town hall. And I hope that you will participate as we move forward and look at these regulations, the draft regulations that are being proposed by the city's staff. It's really critical. There are issues that need to be looked at, whether it's cumulative impacts, whether it's setbacks or reverse setbacks, whether it's the potential for earthquakes, since we're an earthquake-prone area. There are many things to be looking at. And I can't be more grateful for all of you who have participated, and I hope that you will continue to do so as we follow the schedule that was outlined by Jason Rogers. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
All right, thank you, Councilwoman Noble. And with no other hands up at the moment, I believe that is going to have to do it here, since our time is running short here. And yes, Jason Rogers would like to speak. Also wanted to just share with you briefly, for those of you who are still on the call, if you have not yet submitted your comments through the public comment period, what you see now on your screen is the city's oil and gas operations page. You can find this at c3gov.com/oilgas. And if you scroll down here to the section about updating city regulations, you can read a lot of background. Here is the schedule for the adoption process. As you can see, the public comment deadline May 29th, Planning Commission in June, City Council in July. These documents you see here are the actual proposed regulations themselves. And go down here to public comment period. This is the link you would click to submit your written public comments as part of this public comment period for the proposed regulations. And just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of how that system works before we say goodbye. And Jason Rogers, did you have another comment?
I just want to be able to say thank you, and on behalf of staff, we are extremely grateful that we had up to 66 participants on the line, listening, sharing thoughts, comments. This is why we do this. We want your feedback. We want to solicit your concerns, your issues, your thoughts, your ideas. It goes a very long way as we continue to move forward in this process. And to Dominick's good point earlier about that, the public draft is not going to be the final draft. There will be modulation, there will be revisions. Obviously, there will be further questions that come out of the conversations that have been had or will be had as well with our city council and also with our other appointed officials. So please continue to share your thoughts in written form to staff throughout this process, so that we can make sure to share that with the final decision-making body.
And to follow up on Jason's comments there, I do want to thank everyone for attending and taking time out of your day to listen in on this call. We appreciate the feedback, and thank you for being engaged citizens in your community.
All right. Thank you, Dominic. And yeah, once again, just one final note here. Thanks to everyone for attending. And we do invite you to stay updated, stay engaged in this process. You'll see the updates again, as we mentioned, at c3gov.com/oil-gas. Also, if you visit c3gov.com/subscribe, you can actually sign up to receive email alerts when we do post oil and gas related news items on the city website. So when news stories go up on the website, you can sign up for the oil and gas news feed in order to receive an email alert about those. So just wanted to give you a note on that as well. Thanks again for everyone who attended. Apologies if we did not get to your question, but again, you'll have future opportunities to engage, and we invite you to do that going forward. So thanks to our panelists, Jason Rogers, Dominic Martinelli, Matt Sura, as well as help from IT and translation assistance, and Matt Hayter on the line as well. So thanks to everybody for participating this evening.
Very, very quickly, because I don't want this to go unnoticed as well. We did have a total of 8 people connect to the line as it relates to Spanish-speaking services. So thank you so very much as well to the group that was able to participate on our interpretation line. So thank you very much. And only as well want to thank, for the 2 elected officials that did sit in on our conversation and did participate as well. So thank you both as well.
All right. Thanks to everyone for participating.